in different industries. So very, very, very good breadth in terms of experiences that we've all had so far. But so just to, again, let you know that you have about 6-7 days left for that first assignment. There are still quizzes. I had introduced a new one for this particular section. We're going to be talking about planning the sales call. If we go through this and we still have a little time, we'll actually go into the next stage, which is really preparing within the sales call based on what's happening. This is sort of the before you get into the sales call, all the things that we're going to be talking about today. And so again, if you think about a couple things I wanted to share even before we get started. So Naran, I don't know if she's on yet. She wrote in I think it was Naran, maybe somebody else. Apologize if it was somebody else. Last week, this book was mentioned, Never Eat Alone. We were talking about adaptive selling, adaptive relationships, changing your personality style in a sense, adapting based on who you're dealing with, if they're more analytical or if they're more of a driver or if they're more expressive. Remember those things we talked about last time? Or, so this book, Never Eat Alone, it's all about relationships. Remember, I said it was a nice orange color. So there it is. I do have it. It's a brilliant book. And while I have it, I wanted to open up because even though it's this interesting title, Never Eat Alone, and about relationships, there's a lot about communicating and about sales in here. And just to give you a sense of some of the chapter headings, because they're very much in things we've talked about, managing the gatekeeper, warming the cold call. Think about this, doing your homework on who you're talking to, how to network. So, and talks about connecting and conferences, talking to more than one person at a time, building your brand. We talked a little bit about things like that, getting the close, which we'll talk about, right, which is a commitment, building trust. So fantastic book. I don't know if those that have not read it, if you want to explore a little bit deeper in terms of relationship building, adaptive communication styles, very practical book, Never Eat Alone. I recommend that highly. It was great for me to revisit that because it's been a few years since I read it. The other book I mentioned last time, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. There's a couple of offshoots of this book. It's been around since the late 1980s, I believe. It's still a bestseller 30 plus years later. A lot about communicating and connecting with people, and changing styles and things we talked about in terms of beginning with the end in mind. Okay, so if you're planning a sales call, which is what we're going to talk about today, think about what your end game, what result you would love to have happen, what call to action you're going to get from your customer, or you're communicating with somebody. What do you want to have happen? Very clearly, there's a lot of strategies in this book too, about relationships, about adaptive communication, adaptive selling. I think, in fact, they even do have a book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Salespeople. I think that was written after Covey died, but I think his son wrote it. So specific to sales, there's this book as well. So I just wanted to share those with you. Again, I wanted to give you some more practical insights beyond what's in the book, because I think it's important that you have a very good, broad understanding of this concept of what we're talking about in terms of the selling process, in terms of the communication process. Okay. And again, like I said, thank you for those that have gotten the assignment already to me. A lot of really interesting discussions. You have, again, about 6 more days to get that in 1 to 3 pages, double spaced, on those steps to the buying process. So do keep that in mind. It's open for, like I said, for the next week. You can continue to send those in through Moodle. All right, good. So before we get started, any questions about things we covered last week, adaptive selling, any of the planning process we touched on, or anything about the assignment that's still not clear? I know there's a couple of people that have already submitted, but others that haven't. So just keep that in mind. If you have a question about those, feel free to ask. Put it in the chat, or as we go through the chapter material for chapter 7 of Castleberry, you'll start to kind of see now where, again, putting it all together, a lot of these topics, as we talked about, even from the very beginning when we talked about emotional intelligence to the networking pieces, they all build on each other. So this particular topic, as you can kind of see, the learning objectives of this chapter, how to be successful in planning, right? I don't care what we're doing in terms of, could be in sales, right? Some of us are in sales or sales capacity. A lot of us aren't. So use this class session, this topic, to think about how you could be better at planning and organizing whomever it is that you're going to connect with within your company, family, friends. From that standpoint, I think you can get a lot out of this class. Again, even if you're not in sales or will get into sales per se. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the pre-call information that's necessary to gather. Okay, pre-call information is obviously before the actual visit, the connection, whether it's online or in person, or on the phone. What do we need to know? And how do you get that information? There's lots of ways. We've talked a little already about ways to get information on about the company, right? We talked a lot last time about networking. We talked about LinkedIn and social media. So again, as we explore this chapter, start to think about some of the areas we've already covered and how they could pertain to the sales call. All right. And then we'll talk about things like, okay, should we set more than one objective? Is it good to have multiple objectives? And then how we can be effective and efficient in the appointment making process, which is, as you remember, we talked a lot about prospects, those difference between what's a prospect, what's a lead, right? Again, last week we covered that. And if you start to think about, once you have all this list of prospects, remember that funnel that filters in, you have leads that become prospects, which then become eventually satisfied customers, hopefully, right? And so how can we make that process, once we have those leads and those prospects, we need to set up a way, and I know some people already do this because they talked about it in their assignment, setting up a discussion with the potential client or the existing client that you want to sell a different product to or a different service to. All right, so let's move along, and we'll talk about the planning of the sales call. All right, so think about some of the essential pieces when we're talking about planning. Okay, in order to achieve a goal, right? A goal is a result, something that we want to have happen. What do we want to have happen? That's a really good question to ask. Okay, pretty much with anything as we think about an objective, what do we want to have happen? Do we even think about that thoughtfully enough ahead of time? If you're going to be successful in selling, if you're going to be successful in communicating, that is a key question to ask. What is it that you're trying to do? What do you want to have happen? Okay. Obviously, you're not going to get that every time, right? But that's what Covey says, beginning with the end in mind, right? So start to think through this. Okay, we want a commitment from the buyer, right? That could be a really good um, goal to have, right? We want the buyer's respect, meaning we want to build their trust. We want them to know that we're knowledgeable about our service or product or what we're talking about. Even if you're communicating with somebody in your company, think about the end result and think about how you want to be perceived to the other person. Do you want to be perceived as confident, right? And then as we go through this planning the sales call, we have to have a way to meet our objectives, right? So once we set what it is we want, we have to figure out, okay, then how do we get that? And then again, to kind of ladder back to that 8 steps to the buying behavior process, part of the near the end, well, at the beginning, there's evaluation. And at the end, there's evaluation, right? How did we do? Right? So you need to have a way to check and notice when you're planning a sales call and you're actually in the call, how did you do? Did you meet your objectives? So that's kind of how we go through the planning process, kind of overall. All right, this is a really good, I like this flow diagram because it kind of gives you the outcomes we want, right? General outcomes. Sure, we want to make the sale eventually, or sure, we want to make the connection, or we want to influence the buyer in a certain way, or influence the person we're talking to. But you have to follow these steps. So, the first step in planning, you got to get information, right? You got to ask good questions, which is something we talked about. Remember, we talked about being a good listener. So, if we're good at asking questions, we're good at listening, then we can pull data and that will help support the objectives for our call. Again, we gather the information, like we have that prospect list, those leads, right? Okay, find out a little bit about them, right? And then we set our objectives. Sometimes the company sets the objectives for us, right? Sometimes our boss, even if we're at a company and not in sales, our boss gives us clear directives of what we need to do. So some of those objectives are created by our company or the person we work for. So keep that in mind too. It's not only us that's setting those up. Sometimes it's both, right? They give us, okay, parameters of what they want us to accomplish. Boss comes in, even if you're not in sales, maybe you're in engineering, but you have to make a product, maybe you have to make a presentation about your project, right? So what are the objectives for that communication, right? And then the piece about making an appointment, it could be, again, doesn't have to be a physical appointment, but it's setting up a time where you could communicate with the potential prospect, that lead. Okay. And I know there's, again, a few people already online here that are in a sales capacity that they make sure that they talk to their potential customer before a proposal, before you start doing the selling. That's really important to kind of think about. So you there are levels, right? If you're a vendor and you're at a trade show and you're selling your product, whatever it is, maybe you're a farmer and you're selling your produce at a farmer's market, right? The buying process, you might not go through all those steps. You might skip a few. Your customers are already there, but you still have to engage. You still have to have an objective. You have to display your produce in a way that's appealing to the customer, right? You still have to communicate. You can't just sit back and let people come and say nothing, right? Those that are good in sales in that setting, even that's kind of already planned out in a sense, because you're already at a venue, like a farmer's market and you're waiting for people to come through, or you're at a store waiting for people to come in. But you can kind of look at those that are coming near you and to you. How do I get them engaged? And so that could be the engagement could then lead to maybe not necessarily, we want to call it an appointment, but the engagement of a customer, a potential customer talking to you. That could be your end game that you want, right? That's kind of the appointment. Again, as we go through this, we're going to talk about it related to the selling process, but I want you to think outside that too, how it relates to you. Okay? So pre-call information, right? This is strategy. Thinking about all these leads and prospects that we have. How do we get that information? And why do we need it? So you start to think about, the more information you get, not always, because sometimes it's information overload, but generally, the more information you have about the prospect, the more likelihood that you'll be successful in sales, the more likelihood that you'll increase your ability to meet the customer needs, the more likelihood that you'll have to develop a long-term relationship. So as salespeople, or as people that are communicating with others, we need to be aware also of a couple things. Think about, the word costs here is not monetary per se. Costs involved in collecting information. The biggest cost that we have when we're doing our homework and gathering data is what? What's the biggest cost? Time, right? Think about that. Our time is very valuable. And so if we have a lot of different potential prospects and leads to go through, hopefully that, which is a good problem to have as a salesperson or as a business owner, we don't have unlimited time. So we need to think about how to be efficient in collecting the information. And then we need to, and we talked a little bit about this last week and the week before, those CRM systems, those customer relationship management systems, those tracking systems, could be an Excel spreadsheet, could be Salesforce.com, could be some other database that your company has to track a project, but a way to update that on a regular basis. So again, think about, we're gathering information ahead of an actual conversation with a potential client. Okay? How do we become more efficient at gathering the data, about updating the data and using that data, right? It's not, we don't want unlimited information, because then we get overwhelmed and then we're like, oh, we can't be efficient. You want to be as effective a salesperson or a communicator as you can. So we start to kind of think about, okay, we have this prospect or customer as an individual. Okay. And we start to think about, okay, what is it that we need? What is helpful information? And again, we've talked about this from a networking standpoint. And again, it was in this book, Never Eat Alone, right? When you meet somebody, talk about, get their birthdays, get their interests, their family, what they like, what they don't like. As you assess their personality style, what quadrant they might be in, again, think from the standpoint, if you're starting to gather their name, how do we pronounce the name? You remember the very first class we had? I wanted to make sure those that we were talking, did we pronounce the name correctly? And some of you said there's, depending on whom I'm dealing with, they pronounce it differently in different parts of the different countries, or in different regions. But there's a lot of personal information we can gather about who we're talking to, that potential prospect. That's important. Education, career aspirations, that could be really critical information. Their interests, their disinterests, right? As I said, what they don't like, maybe the product that they're using or the service, and maybe some of the, if we already know they're using a competitive product, that gives us a lot of information. Maybe they've been using it for a long time. Maybe they just switched to a service from a competitor. Again, social style, talked about that last week. And it's not like we have to have perfect information, right? It doesn't have to be 100% accurate where everything is, and we have to write everything down. But if we can gather information that is more accurate and that gives us an ability to get into the potential customer's mind ahead of time, that's what we're trying to find out. And so then it becomes this, what is the attitude towards the salesperson, the company, and the product? As you gather this information, think about that. Because do you get excited about this potential prospect? Could you get excited about them as you gather information? Or could you get discouraged and think about, wow, they're going to be a really tough person to deal with? Again, how do you set up your mind ahead of time? Potentially, that's information too. Your information about how you view this potential prospect. All right. Again, as we start to gather the information, we're working on trying to build this relationship. Okay. And so there's certainly, we'll call them formal reporting ways to build a relationship, meaning that the actual data we get from them and how do we track that data, right? But it's also important to think about their company, the group they belong to, the norms within their company, that they may have policies. I was reading one of the papers from the assignment, and it talked about certain company policies in terms of how to talk to a potential client. And it said, I mentioned this earlier, this class, but I want to bring it up again, that you're pretty much not allowed to make a presentation until you've talked to the customer ahead of time. And so, Mohammed, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, it's just a little and very small question
Yeah.
about the title of this page,
Yes.
because it is, 1 second, it is prospect or customer as an individual. It is, I mean,
Yes.
it is correct like this.
Yes.
And
So we're talking about a particular person, one person, not really as um, selling to a group of people. Okay.
ah,
Um, but but we still need to think about when we're selling as a single entity, an individual, what group do they belong to, right? So again, as you start to develop your planning, that's a really, really good question. Thank you for bringing that to mind, because language is really important, right? The words we use, how we frame things ahead of time. So if we know we're talking to a committee, for instance, 5 people, that's a very different pre-call planning. Then it's probably more sophisticated, it's probably more data needed than talking to an individual. Okay. So, me as one person, look at it from this perspective too, Muhammad, as well. I'm not a fleet, multiple salespeople. I don't represent like 9 salespeople from my company. Sometimes I do. But in this case, also, you are the individual representing your company as well. Because sometimes, and I've seen this happen, certain companies have 4 or 5 people that they might send to on a site. And that's different people in terms of the salesperson. They might have a technical person with them. They might also have a customer relations person with them. And so again, think from the standpoint of you as an individual gathering information about the customer, the prospect, the potential person you're talking to. And so developing that relationship is key. And the word that, I like here in terms of, the bond that the prospect has already formed with other salespeople. That's important to think about too. Okay. As you are working with another person, think about this. You're trying to influence another, whether it's in the selling process, the communicating process. They have relationships with other people, right? Even if you're at a company and you're trying to influence another colleague about something, they might have a different boss than you have, okay? And they have to appeal to their boss in a certain way. They have a relationship already. So if you know what that relationship is ahead of time, that can be information that feeds into your database of information. Now, also, too, we think about where they're evaluating a potential service or product, obviously. And so as they do, you need to start to kind of think about, or you're evaluating them. But you think about, again, that 8-step buying process. Evaluation is a huge piece. What do we need to know about the product? What do they need to know about the product? What's important? As you're gathering the data, you might notice that you might think, oh, wow, they're more of like an accountant kind of personality. They're very analytical. They're going to need a lot of hard data. Okay, so you need to gather that information ahead of time. Start to think too about the evaluation process. How are they going to decide on, if they like my service or me or not? So again, it's almost like, I'm going to use this analogy. It's like a chess match in a sense, right? Whether you play chess or not, you're always trying to think certainly about what's in front of you, right? All those potential pieces you could move, but you're also trying to think a little bit ahead of time. If I do this, what are they going to do? And so that's part of this evaluation process, to start to think about, if I present my product or my service or my consulting in a certain way, how might they evaluate it? And so you're thinking ahead of time. This is part of the planning process, right? Future thinking. If we're going on vacation, think about this. What do we need to know ahead of time? Obviously, right? We need to have the transportation booked. We need to have a room somewhere we're going to stay. But do you need to book all the restaurants ahead of time? Maybe some of them, but do you need to book all the tourist attractions you want to see? Maybe some of them. But it's like, until you get there and start experiencing, how could you evaluate a restaurant ahead of time? Well, you can go online and start reading about it, or a friend could give you that information. So you're gathering data ahead of time of a trip. So again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a sales call. This is useful to start thinking about, what information do we need ahead of time? How might that person react? How might I react? We don't have to be perfect with it, right? We don't have to spend hours and hours, although sometimes when the sale is large enough and the potential is large enough, maybe we do need to prepare and plan for hours, but usually not. Usually it's a cursory 10 minutes, 15 minutes to plan. Okay, here's the potential prospect. Here's what I need to know. Here's where I'm going to get that information. Okay. So again, let's move along, because I want you to start to think about other pieces here, helpful information that we can gather, right? About the prospect or the customer's organization, right? Demographics, right? That word encompasses so much, right? What is the type of organization that they belong to? Size, location. Is it multinational? Is it all over the world? Is it local? Is it, specific? Is it only online? Do they have a warehouse? What are the products and services they offer? Right? If I'm selling a product, they have other products. Maybe I'm a supplier, right? Maybe I supply a product to an airline, right? And perhaps maybe that airline, maybe I'm a caterer. Maybe I supply the maintenance. Maybe I supply the engine. So there's pieces and parts that I might supply, and they already have other customers and other relationships that they're dealing with. So I need to kind of think through that, right? Yes, I'm a salesperson selling them, but I'm only one piece of maybe all the channels that they have that they're working through. As important as, we talked about this too, what makes a good prospect, right? Somebody that can pay. So that's important, right? That they have funds, especially if you're a business owner. Mohammed, you have another question.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I need to know what is the difference between the position of product manager and the sales in terms of looking for information like what you are saying, because looking for all of this, I'm a little bit confused being it's a product manager responsibility or it's a sales responsibility.
Yeah, that's a good question. In that respect, sometimes you can think about the salesperson might, in terms of the pre-gathering data, contact somebody at the company, your company, to gather more information. So part of the gathering process could be talking to people that might already know about this type of customer that you're dealing with. So it's internal. And that's a really good point, Mohammed. Thank you for bringing that up. So, excuse me, it's not only looking at, excuse me, outside, but that product manager might have information that you need to know before you get into the sales call. So then it becomes more of a partnership to gather the data, and you're using their knowledge to enhance your planning. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So primary, it is, I would say, it is a product manager responsibility to collect this data, but the sales person has to know this data before going to the sales call. So either to get it by himself or the product manager. Okay.
Exactly. Yes. So, obviously the company in and of itself has people responsible for different parts of the selling process. But the salesperson, I think overall has to take responsibility, whether it's them finding out the information from an internal employee or them gathering it themselves. Ultimately, the salesperson needs to know about that customer. And so where they get the data from, the information from, it multifaceted, could go a lot of different ways, but you can't assume as a salesperson that somebody's going to already have the data. Now they may feed in, if you have a customer relationship tracking system and you put in your prospects into that, the product manager might come in and fill in some data for you in your spreadsheet, so that when you open up your spreadsheet, you're like, wow, all this information, that's terrific. So yes, they're responsible, they have it, but they also fed it to me and I need to find that out. So that's a big piece. And then you think about this word culture, right? If we think through, again, it could be an individual, but within the individual, what is their culture that are they, meaning that they could be an analytical person, but their culture is very expressive. The company's culture behind them is always about building that relationship, and they take a lot longer time. And so, yes, you may be dealing with an analytical person, but the culture might dictate that the buying process takes longer. Okay, so we just, again, we don't have to go overboard and think through this like it's life or death, but we just need to kind of start to formulate questions. And we're not going to be perfect, right? We're going to miss things. Salespeople aren't perfect, but again, part of it is the gathering of information, then checking and making sure, well, if I miss that information, then it comes to the point where then you're asking the customer, then you're in the call. Again, you're not going to be able to do this perfectly, but it at least gives you a chance to set the game up ahead of time. Like, again, if it's a chess match, you can kind of have some moves already in mind. You can kind of think about, and they'll do that, I'll do this. That's kind of the planning process. And then it becomes like we think about the prospects' customers, right? I said this larger view. Who are their customers? Is that going to make a difference into how I'm positioning, how I'm going to be, right? And as we think about that, they're always looking, what are the benefits they seek from my products and services? Again, I mentioned that before. That's important to kind of start to think through. And you may not know all this. It's okay, as we are salespeople, we're good communicators. We're good at asking questions. There's going to be a lot of stuff you just cannot find out ahead of time. That's okay. That's what the selling process is about, finding that data. So if you can't get all the information, eventually, when you're talking to that person, you gather more data, right? We start to think more through this too. And I mentioned this before, the prospect's competitors, right? If they're using a competitive product, you're even at a company, if you're talking to, you have to present your project to a bunch of other people, start to think through, not necessarily that they're a competitor of yours, but the makeup of that group. It's a different division within your company that you have to promote whatever it is that you're doing. So who are they, right? How do they differ in terms of how they might think through what is evaluated? And you're thinking about strategic positioning, right? It's all about positioning, gathering data ahead of time, before a call, before you're talking to somebody, is about positioning. That word position is, how do you frame what you're going to be communicating? And so, again, think about this. We talked about this last time. It wasn't in your book, but I think it's really important. That's why I mentioned it last time. What do you want to be known as? Meaning, what do you want your customer, your potential customer, the person you're communicating with, your client, whomever, what do you want them to have an idea about you? Meaning, are you reliable? Maybe that's the whole point. Your objective could be, I want to make sure that the customer knows I am reliable and my product is reliable. That could be the objective. You're gathering data and you're trying to figure that out, and you're trying to position. That is your key. You have the best product that's the most reliable. Knowing that ahead of time, how do I position that? Right? And then you throw out things like here, historical buying patterns. That's more data. How have they bought in the past? Now, you might not know, but you might find that out, right? If it's a customer that your product is an expensive product, maybe it's software, maybe it's, hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to invest in it, and you're positioning that. How did they buy that the last time? That's valuable, because then you ask that question, how did they make that decision the last time? Oh, this is the data they used last time. I better have that same data. Or they evaluated things from this perspective. So that is another piece, historical buying patterns. Here's a thought for you. Again, outside sales, not outside sales, but outside the selling domain, we're talking to somebody, a relative, okay, and we want to influence them. And they made a decision long ago in a certain way, okay, about wanting to help something in the family, right? Wanting to, connect the family to, I don't know, a service provider of some kind. And they made a decision, and they had that data a while ago that they made that choice, right? Maybe they hired, an accountant for the family, a tax planning person. And you're trying to influence them and say, you know what, that person did not do a great job. We want to get somebody else. But you don't want to hurt their feelings, right? They did a lot of work. So your role in that situation might be, okay, how do I position myself? What information do I need to know? And part of it is, if you know how they purchase, how they got that person ahead of time, maybe the person that they got as a tax planner, it came from a friend of theirs who they're no longer involved with. Or maybe they didn't do their due diligence, they didn't do their homework, but they were excited about something because they liked their friend that introduced that person to them, right? If you know that ahead of time, you have more information with which how to position how you're going to have your communication. So again, can we outthink somebody else? I don't know if that's the kind of what we're trying to do, but it's like we're just gathering information. And are we gathering the right information to make us more effective at whatever it is we're doing? That's really what it comes down to. So let's kind of look at this helpful information about the organization piece, right? If we're talking about, again, I want to narrow it down in the selling process here. The customer you're talking to, who are their suppliers? That could be an information piece that's valuable to you. What is their level of service with their suppliers, right? If they're not happy with some of the service they're getting, that provides an opportunity for you and your product and service. Again, you might not be able to get all the data ahead of time, but it's helpful to start exploring that. What are the reasons for buying from their present suppliers? If you're trying to get the business from somebody else, they're using a competitive product. How did they buy? What are their reasons? They might not be satisfied with what they've already had, right? And so do you know why they're not happy? Why are they looking for a new service provider? That could be helpful from that perspective. So start to think through, and then, current buying situation. As you review your buying process, those 8 steps, right? What are most important? What are the strengths and weaknesses of the competitors? You might know, obviously, if they're talking to you, they're probably talking to other competitors. Who are they talking to? What are they, even you can think about this too, even if you're interviewing for a job, right? You're interviewing for a job, you're representing yourself as an individual, interviewing with the potential company. right? You may not know who else they're interviewing, but you might think about, okay, maybe they're talking to a competitor. Maybe they're talking to somebody that has more experience than I. Maybe they're talking to somebody that's younger than me or older or has different experience. You start to put yourself in that frame of mind, your focus might shift how you present yourself. So again, not about trying to be perfect at this information gathering, but maybe there's something that we don't know yet that if we did know could change our ability to be effective. And so as we go through this, it becomes like there's a lot of potential information to know, right? I mean, the book really stresses this quite a bit in this section about the sales planning process, but start to think about some of these other pieces. Their role in the decision, like whoever it is you're talking to, are they the final decision maker or are they a piece of it? Maybe they're gathering the data and they present it to somebody else. Maybe you have to talk to 4 different people at the company, right? And you're dealing with 4 different people. Of those, who is the most influential? That's another piece to kind of start to think about. Adversaries, people that might be trying to, in the selling process, there might be people at the company you're trying to sell that don't want to change. Okay, that like things the way they are. Think about a company that you're at and employees. Not everybody likes change, right? So there might be an initiative to get a new service provider for the company, maybe a cleaning service, right? You bring a new cleaning service in. But there might be people at the company that say, you know what we have is fine. I don't want to bring a new cleaning service in. They might be an adversary. They might be trying to oppose everything you're doing. Got to know about those people too, because you could have the greatest product and selling process, but there might be somebody that's kind of, we'll call it, throwing a landmine into your process, that's trying to disrupt everything. Who are those disruptors? Good to know that. Current problems faced by the organization, that's pretty basic, right? Overall, maybe there's other problems that the organization that you're servicing is facing that maybe your product doesn't relate to, but it's important to know. For instance, you're selling to a company. Maybe that company is downsizing their employees and they're going through hard times, right? In today's economy, that's a lot of companies. Even I was just reading, like even the company like Meta, that's, Facebook, they evaluated a lot of their employees unfavorably. And so all of a sudden they're downsizing 10%. If you're a company that calls on Facebook as a supplier of, we'll say, paper supplies, even though everything is online, people still need paper, right? Stickers or various things. You could be selling a really good product, but the culture in the company is going through downsizing and everybody is a little bit distraught. Remember we talked about like that emotional intelligence piece? Can we get inside the prospect's head? Well, this is a question is like, what's happening in the company? And then you start to then think about this piece. Those stages in the buying cycle, right? We talk about the consumer buying behavior process, right? That you have the assignment for. What stage are you in? Again, this is all information gathering. Now think about this. I know there are some companies where you might start at step 4 You're the salesperson. Somebody already did a lot of information for you, gathering, and you're starting at the implementation stage. Your role as a salesperson is to gather data to make sure the product that they've just acquired from your company is doing well. Maybe that's your role. So they're already in the evaluation stage. Maybe your job is already when competitors are introducing potential products to this company, and you've already kind of bypassed their evaluation process from the standpoint of they already narrowed down to 3 competitors. You're one of them. And that's when you come in. Maybe initially they looked at 15 different products. You weren't part of that decision. That's okay. They start with step 2 or 3. Now here's the competitors, and you're one of the 3. Then you go, right? So that's important to know too, where in the process you might be. That's helpful. Policies, procedures. Again, I don't want to rehash too many things, but there's a lot of information. Okay. Let's talk. We talked a little bit about this. This is important too. Where do we get that information, right? As we're gathering the information, what are the sources? So there's certainly company records, right? Muhammad brought up this point about whose responsibility. Is it the product manager or the salesperson when they're making a sales call to gather some of that information? Well, if information is fed into the CRM system, customer relationship management, this database from a different employee in your company, it's up to you to look through it. That's a resource. So you look through there. Obviously, there are, we'll call them sales portals and selling centers, meaning that there's online databases that you can go to that already have information in one place about the customers. Sometimes they're industry specific, right? Sometimes if you're working in the government industry, a lot of that data is public knowledge. And so you can gather that data online and you know who their suppliers are. You might even be able to find some of those proposals that they made, that people made ahead of time. There might be, and I've seen this online sometimes, a presentation from a competitor online to a company. I literally have seen this. I was researching for a potential partner in the coaching business that I work in right now. And I saw a potential client that I was like, wow, this is a racket club, somebody that I could have customers and work with them. They had somebody like me make a presentation to them, a PowerPoint. All those slides were available online on the Racket Club's website. And from that standpoint, what was brilliant was I was able to see all that data. Now, maybe they didn't intentionally leave it up there for somebody like me to see it, but I saw that. And so that helped me position how I was doing things. So the internet is a great resource. Social media is a great resource. Online business information providers, great resources. There are businesses that gather data that you can approach to get information about your potential customer. So there's lots of things here. Let's just again, as you start to think through this, think about how this might be helpful for you. Sources of information, secretaries, receptionists, those people have a lot of data, right? Salespeople in other areas might have dealt with this customer before. It's not competing directly to what you're selling, but they may have called on this person already, right? You're interviewing for a company and there's a potential, the potential new boss, whoever, Maybe you know somebody that knows that person. So you call them and say, what could you tell me about this person? That's gathering information. Trade shows, we talked a little bit about that, right? If you're in a business of selling apparel, shirts, t-shirts, athletic apparel, and you go to a trade show, you get a lot of information by seeing all the competitors out there. What's working, what's not working, right? Who are those main buyers? And you start to kind of think about, their current customers, right? Can I get information about them through who is already using their products? And again, like I said, the U.S. Commerce Service here, there's lots of potential in other countries too. There's certain government agencies that gather data that you might have access to. That's really brilliant. So that's the information gathering. I want to talk a little bit about, and we'll take a break in a short time here, in like about 10 minutes. But as we start setting these call objectives, right? As we gather this information, part of it is, okay, let's review information that we've gathered, right? That's part of it. Wherever that information came, let's review it ahead of time. As we get ready to make the sales call, as we get ready to talk to that next person, what do we want to remember about the relationship that we might have with the prospect, right? So again, it's like, what's top of mind? You got a bunch of data you gathered. You look at it like anything else. What's most important, you say? And what do I need to remember mostly? Again, we're thinking about, you want to have a relationship, you want to make your call objective. What do I want to communicate the most? I got 9 data points about this customer. Is it all important that I work through in the first time I talk with them? Probably not. Of those 9 data points, what are maybe the top 3 that are most important? Right? And then as I start to think about, my goal, my company, like I said, sometimes the company sets goals ahead of time. Maybe they have an overall goal. It's not just the salesperson's goals, right? So you kind of start to think through, again, it may not be solely your objective. Your company might have objectives too. The sales team, your sales manager, might have an objective too. You're dealing with all those pieces, right? So as you evaluate all these objectives, there's criteria, right? You start to think about, okay, my company has an objective for me in this call. My sales team, my manager has an objective for me, and then I set my own. You got to figure out, okay, all that pieces, how do I organize that, right? I can't, only solely be focused on what my company wants. I got to make my numbers, right? Yeah, they give me how many sales I have to make in a year and my goal, but I have to go through that, and I have to be realistic, and I got to say, okay, I just can't make it all in one day, right? So I got to be specific. What do I set? How precisely do I look through that data? What are my objective targets, right? And just to give you a sense, right, this is a continual process. This is not like a one-time thing, right? And you'll continually do this with new potential customers, and you get better at it. And then you get better at adaptive, we'll even call it adaptive information gathering, because that's sort of what it is too. We talked about the adaptive selling process, adaptive communication. How good do we get at gathering data? Can we be adaptive? We could spend a lot of time gathering a lot of information that's not pertinent to your objective. Is that then important? Is that a good use of your time? Maybe not, right? The product manager at your company might throw in all kinds of data about your potential customer, that's not pertinent to how you're going to be and your objective in that day. So then you need to get outside information. So it's kind of think like, okay, what specifically do I need to know? Again, but then you still have to be realistic, right? It's time based. So you don't have unlimited, we talked about this, you don't have unlimited time. You can't, spend 6 months gathering data about a customer. Now maybe you have a relationship with them over a long period of time and they're a client that will keep coming back. So you slowly keep gathering data, but you don't have to crunch the numbers and get all the data ahead of time. So the other piece that's important to remember, this is it's a challenge when you think about it. When you're setting your objectives, you want to make sure that they're reachable, right? If you're setting an objective, even outside sales, if you think about, I want a new job, I'm interviewing with a person, you can't set a challenging goal like, I want one interview with a person and I want to close them on them offering me the job. That might not be realistic, right? That might be challenging. It might not be reachable. Potentially, I want to make it to the next stage, right? I want to give them, now you're at the third stage in the interview process. You're like, I want to make it your objective might be, your mindset might be, well, sure, I want to get the job, but I want to make their decision very difficult. I want them, if they tell me no, that I didn't get the job, I want them to have it a very difficult decision because I'm a really good candidate. So is that more reachable? Yeah, probably. When you start to think about an objective, it has to be something you can control. If you're setting objectives that you can't control, you're wasting your time, right? If the person you're talking to is not the final decision maker, and you know that ahead of time, it's crazy to think about, oh yeah, they're going to purchase from me because I'm talking to them and I'm really good at what I'm doing. Again, if they're not the final decision maker, that's outside your control at that moment. Maybe you influence them so that they then take the information and share it with somebody that has the authority to buy, and they do a good job in selling your product to their boss, right? That could be your objective. But kind of start to think through that. More objectives. Got to be measurable, right? You got to have some way to measure it. It can't be this amalgamous, this, gray area. Well, I want them to like me as a salesperson. I get this a lot, and think about, you're communicating with somebody. Yeah, I want them to like me and like my product. How do you define like, right? Maybe you want them to respect that you have a good product that's reliable. And then you have to think about, okay, if I want to have them think that my product is reliable, what is an objective, effective way to measure that, right? Maybe it's they give me a percentage of their sales. Maybe I know I can't get 100%, but maybe they can give me 20% to try my product out because they want to evaluate it more. That happens sometimes. You call it's like a test case, a pilot. I'm not going to give you the full order. Let's buy 20% of what you got. We'll see how we do. That could be your call objective. Can I get my product in the door? That's what you could say, right? How do you evaluate that? The buyer has to say, I want 20% of your product. That is a very specific, realistic, measurable goal. Okay. What are examples of call objectives, right? As we kind of think about this, what would be good? We'll take a break in about 3 or 4 minutes here, a 10-minute break. Objectives, here's some other objectives. To have the prospect agree to a demonstration. That's a good objective to have. Schedule a meeting for further discussion. Another really good in the selling process. Complete a survey. You give them a call to action. They have to do something that requires them to do something to gather information, right? Maybe they're reviewing competitors and you want to give them, okay, here's my product. I want you to evaluate my product based on the 3 competitors that you're reviewing. Maybe that's your call objective. And that's how your business works. Maybe that's what they do, right? You could try, here's another one, to convince the buyer to endorse your product, right? Remember, if they're not the key decision maker, maybe your call objective is, I want to get that buyer's approval that they like my product, that they'll recommend it to the other person. That could be your call objective. Will they recommend your product to their superior? It could be, okay, it takes 6 months for the selling process. My goal is to get them to initiate the paperwork for that, right? Because they're, to be considered a possible vendor, right? So I want them to get them to bring my product on as a potential product for later. That could be, so they got to get the potential, right? It's like you're working with a school system. Sometimes I work with a school system. I have to get the purchase order. I have to get a purchase order. Now, I don't know exactly what I'm selling them in particular. I haven't talked to them about the proposal, but if I can get my business in their system of purchase orders, then I'll have already established a relationship. So then they can cut a purchase order, a sale, much more easily. That could be my objective. So there's lots of things you can kind of think about. Can I get an order from the prospect, a smaller one, right? Can I schedule them to do something, a marketing program? Can I get them, and can I get them to, okay, my company is going to sponsor you at the next trade show. That could be the call objective, right? Can you host my product in the next convention, right? That could be it. It could be you're convincing the retailer to display your company's promotional items. Maybe you have a product that is on sale and you offer a money back guarantee. Can I get this company to sell my product and show that I have an amazing guarantee to their customers? That could be it too. So as you can kind of see, and we're going to take a break in 1 minute here, you can kind of see, because we're going to then talk about, okay, we have many call objectives. What do we do then? Right? As I say, you're going to have a lot. So let's take 10 minutes. Well, we've covered a lot here in this, selling process of pre-planning, calling objectives, right? Let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back. We'll finish up this chapter based on the time. Probably not even be able to get into the next chapter, which is okay, because this is important. All right. I will see everyone in 10 minutes, and then we'll finish up this chapter on call objective. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully that was a full 10 minutes. If not, then you need another few minutes. That's fine. I'm going to get started because I want to be mindful of the time and try to get us all out of here at the top of the hour. Okay. Which we could do if we're efficient, right? In terms of our process of going through the material, right? Being more efficient in the call planning process. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this multiple call objectives, right? From the standpoint when we've talked about, sometimes companies have their objectives. Our boss might have an objective and we have an objective, right? So there's lots of pieces. Also, personally, we may have 3 objectives. There might be 3 things that we want to have happen, right? In our communication, if you think about it, even if you're talking to a relative and you're trying to influence them, there might be 3 things that you want to get them to buy into. Maybe you're trying to influence them on what restaurant to go to. Not only that, you're trying to influence them maybe sorry, I think I was on mute here. Hopefully. So here's the thing, multiple call objectives. I want to make sure you all got that. Again, the company can have an objective, right? Your boss can have an objective and you can have objectives all at the same time. And you could have multiple things that you want to have happen, right? The example I was using is if we're talking about a relative and we're going to a restaurant here. I'm going to put my headset on here. I just got a little notice that the audio quality is not as good as it needs to be on the, I don't know what's going on, but maybe it's the connection. Let me plug this in. Bear with me. Hopefully now, okay. Hopefully we're good. Can you hear me okay, everyone? Somebody give me a thumbs up just to make sure that the audio is still good.
Yes. Yes,
Perfect.
Doctor, you're clear to me.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So just wanted to, let's talk about this call objectives. If we're from a standpoint of influencing where we want to go to a restaurant with our family members. Okay. That's not a selling process, but I want to give you an idea here how this works. So it could be, I want to influence them on the restaurant, which one. I want to influence them maybe on the time of when we're leaving. And maybe I want to influence them on the type of, maybe the area in town I want to go to, where the restaurant is located. Maybe there's 3 locations for this one restaurant. And I want to go to this particular one because it's on the water and it's beautiful. That could be 3 different objectives. Now, there's a primary one, right? I want them to go to the restaurant that I want them to choose because it's one I really like. So that could be the primary objective. The secondary objective might be, I don't want to go too early, right? I want to go 7 p.m. I don't want to go to 6 p.m. That's a little too early to eat dinner. Okay. That could be secondary. Now they may pick the restaurant, but then all of a sudden they say, you know what, I want to go at 6:30. Okay. And that could be good. And we can do that. Right. And then there could be an overly optimistic call objective. You could have something that's like, I really want to eat later, like 7:30. I know my family doesn't like to eat that late, but that's my, like, in an ideal world, they would go to my restaurant at 7:30. Okay, that's like the outcome that's ideal, the most optimistic. Okay, looking at this in terms of a selling conversation, you have a primary objective, whatever that might be, what you hope to achieve. There might be a minimum also, okay? If my customer is not going to buy my product initially, I want to at least get them to have a commitment that they'll look at my product more carefully. That's the minimum call. Objective, my optimistic one might be they buy not only my product, but they buy a year's supply of my product. That's like very, very optimistic, right? And then there's obviously secondary call objectives, knowing that I want to get them to trust me and my product. Maybe that's secondary to the sale or to the commitment to look at my product even more, right? So it becomes this way we organize our thoughts about, okay, what is it we want, right? As Stephen Covey would say in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, if one of the habits is to begin with the end in mind, if we're beginning with the end, our call objective, what is that primary one? What is like the least, the minimum? What is an optimistic one, and what might be a secondary one? And you could have these again. The company might dictate certain call objectives. They might have a primary objective too. You have to get in front of 10 prospects every single week. That could be their call objective. And you know, okay, but you still have a process to follow. I got to get information. I got to gather it. I got to set up the appointments. I got to do all that. So that causes you to be a little bit more efficient and understanding, like, it's the end of the week. You've only talked to 7. Ooh, if I'm going to make their call objective, I need to talk to 3 more. And then it becomes like, we've talked about this. Is there a company directive that kind of gets you to think in maybe not the best way, the most efficient way? Maybe the company is setting up, extra goals that are not pertinent to you, but you have to do them anyway. So there's an alignment issue, right? Maybe the company you're working for, it doesn't have all the best interest of you in mind and being successful. Maybe their initiative is for the majority of salespeople. They have 100, but you're in the top 10 and you don't do things in the way they do them. So there might be, this is an interesting way to look at it, objectives. There might be objectives that you have in mind that are a little bit different than your company, that become your primary, and you put the company's objectives as more the secondary. If you're successful at what you're doing, the company will go along with that. And I've had that happen where it's like, okay, I don't have to talk to 25 clients every single week. If I'm able to close more of them, maybe I only need to talk to 15. And they're building fluff into my day. Like, I have to talk to all these extra people that are not even potential buyers. Those leads, right, that kind of funnel down to a prospect. Maybe they're more leads, but I have those people in there just because it makes my numbers look good for the company. But is it really efficient for me? Got to kind of start to think through that. All right. So if we have multiple objectives, we can also start to think about setting objectives over several sales calls. Think about this. You might have one objective. It might take you 3 sales calls to make that objective, that primary one. But maybe you have secondary sales call objectives that you could get in that first interaction. So if you're going to be communicating with a client multiple times, a lot of times that's what it takes. Interviewing for a job, multiple interviews, usually. If it's a good, solid job, right? If you're going to a restaurant and they have a sign up on the board that says, waiters and waitresses wanted, and you just go in and they hire you right off the bat, that's a possibility. We're talking now, we're MBA students, right? And so we're talking about higher level thinking. Higher level jobs may take 3 or 4 interviews to get that sale, to get that job offer, to get whatever it is that you're trying to. Got to have good records, right? You're gathering information. And like last week, we talked about adaptive selling. can we make adjustments? Adaptive sales is making adjustments from one call to the next, from one interaction, one communication to a potential prospect to the next one that you have with them. What adjustments do you need to make? Again, we're not going to be perfect from the beginning, right? There is no perfect sales call, if that's such a thing, all right? But can we make adjustments to be more effective next time? Maybe we forgot to ask a couple of questions to gather data. And we're like, oh gosh, you could beat yourself up for forgetting it. Or you could say, you know what? I can ask them the next time. In my long-term planning, I make sure I got that information the next time. That helps you prepare for the next call. That's what this is about. It's like, as I say, gathering information, we're pre-planning. It's going to usually have multiple conversations with the same person or multiple groups of people. So what adjustments, what am I gathering? How do I become more effective in the next one? And who do I call? Who do I need to come? Do I need then to bring in the product manager with me next time? Maybe that could be. When I was in the textbook business, sometimes I make a sales call with a professor trying to get them to use my book in their class. But maybe I needed a product expert. Maybe I needed to bring in, which I did, the editor who signed that book, who signed that author, who knows the ins and the outs of that product better than I do. Maybe, this happened sometimes too, I needed to bring the director of marketing in so that they were the person that understood how successful this book was across the country. Who else is using the book? What other professors are? How are they being, how is it working with the students? Maybe they have all that data. Maybe they gave me some of it, but sometimes I bring in an expert, another expert, right? We talked about that a number of weeks ago. Are we always the expert in everything we do? No. Sometimes it's helpful that they look at us as the expert or the person that could get the information. But in my next sales call, maybe it's like, okay, or I'll bring my boss in there too. Maybe this is an amiable, expressive, and they like to be felt important. It's a longer process. So if I brought my boss into the sales call with me, the next time they'll be like, wow, here's your boss comes in now. Oh, wow, I do feel important now. Thank you for bringing your boss in there. Another person to talk to, another way to gather information. But now you can kind of see we're building a process to eventually make the sale, right? And so that's what it becomes. So there were a couple of examples in the book here, and I don't know if you read through them. I don't want to spend a lot of time on them. They were kind of interesting about a consumer electronics company, some objectives. I'm not going to highlight all the key features here, but I just wanted to kind of give you a sense because it shows progression, and I like the progression. I think, and I was reading a couple of your assignments, again, the steps of the buying behavior process, and a few people put in how long the sales cycle took. Well, this was a month here, and then there were evaluations that took 3 months, and then this process took 6 months. So over a year was the whole process. And that's what I want to share with you, and that's what this example was like. They had dates, right, and call objectives, right? Okay, I'm meeting on October 10th. Here's what I need to have happen. Then we have a week later we're meeting, and then nearly 3 weeks later we're meeting, and then another week we're meeting. You can kind of see the call objectives switch up a little bit with each successful meeting. Sometimes they're the same. The call objective from November 10th and November 17th, it's like secure normal repeat orders. Same objective, okay? But sometimes they're very different. October 10th, secure normal repeat orders, but then the next week, I want to have them agree on to display my product. Different objective. So you can kind of see how when we go through this process, then you kind of think about, when we talk about evaluating, right? That buyer behavior process that you're writing about, that 8th step, how did we do, right? In that process. That's a similar step to, okay, how did I do in my call objectives in my sales? What were the results? So you can kind of go through and then put the results down. On October 10th, after I saw that customer and then did all the what happened? Did they buy my product? Did they repurchase? Okay. Maybe one of the days, oh my gosh, the person I wanted to see was out. So I had to talk to his assistant. But that wasn't very effective, right? It's not always planning and everything works according to plan. People get sick. People are like, okay, this person's out. You need to talk to them. And then all of a sudden, Steve is back on November 11th. He agrees and he's going to buy my product. But, he's thinking, well, you know what? The price is not great. I need a better price. So then you have to go back and, you see how you're recalibrating everything. You see how, this process is fluid. It's not a one-time always fix all. You're communicating, you're figuring out information. Okay, how did I do? You're asking that question, you're communicating again, right? And maybe you're gathering new data. Maybe you have to keep selling the same points. Maybe it's new points you're selling. Maybe new objections come up, right? It's constantly adjusting. That's what adaptive selling is. Adaptive selling is adaptive in all the stages of the selling process. Flexibility. Okay? The nice thing when we say it's adaptive and it's flexible is that it kind of gives us this, oh, so I don't have to be perfect. I might have another opportunity. I can ask more questions. I can be a better listener. Maybe I asked the right questions, but I didn't listen carefully enough to get the right data. So I got to ask the same question again. Maybe I wrote down the wrong thing. And then I made an assumption that they would buy, and they weren't yet at that stage to buy. So then let's kind of start thinking about, remember we talked about this goal, what do I want to have happen? What are good goals of the buyers for sales calls? Kind of think about what they might want, right? We're thinking about our objectives, what we want. The buyer, what might their goals be? And then kind of start working our way backwards with those. If that's what they want, how do I give them those? And then maybe we prioritize those in our objectives. So again, potential goals of a buyer for the sales call. On-time delivery. Yes, they want your product, but they want it when they need it, right? I want to go to a restaurant with my family, but what if I have to wait 3 hours? We get there, everybody buys into my restaurant and my time, but oh my gosh, the restaurant is so busy. Then what happens, right? If I didn't realize that this restaurant is so busy, I look a little bit bad. So I need to think through what the buyer's goals might be and how I can satisfy them. Now their products, they may have certain specifications that they want for your products. Obviously, pricing, those, obviously everybody wants good competitive pricing. If you're interviewing for a job and they offer you a salary and you don't think it's a appropriate salary based on your experience, you want competitive pricing. Think about that. You have to think about, okay, they're offering you $60,000. You think you should have 80, right? They offer you the job at 60. What do you do? Right? You need to start to think through, would I take the job at 60? Could I get them to give me 70? What do I need to do to position, that word again, myself to get 70? right? So it's starting to think through getting in the head of the buyer, right? Again, we can't be perfect with it, but we can start to think, okay, maybe they have to have the right technical support or service, right? Maybe that's their main goal. Maybe their main goal, they're buying my product, yes. They buy a certain amount, yes, or my service. But maybe their primary goal is they want to know they're going to get the technical support for the software when they purchase it. And so then I have to think, okay, how do I demonstrate that for them? How do I make that goal attainable and realistic and deliver it to them? And then you start to think about, okay, emergency responses, right? Okay, you don't have to go too far here, but again, think through this. The person you're talking to or at the company is sick. Now you have to talk to somebody else. Or, you're talking to somebody and then all of a sudden they get an email about a crisis happening at their company. It then shifts. Their goal was initially buy your product from you because you're the good salesperson, hopefully, right? But now it becomes like, oh my gosh, I got to manage. Our computer server crashed in this location. All my customers over there are having a problem. They need to deal with that emergency before they come back to you. That might happen. That happens a lot. I have partners in at certain racket clubs that I provide their service of coaching for their athletes. And sometimes they don't prioritize me. Sometimes they're a business, and this happened. One of their employees left. Their head of marketing just left. And so all of a sudden, those promotions that they were promoting my work with them, the person left. They need to deal with that first before they can work with me on some other initiatives. That had an emergency situation, right? I had all this planning. Did a lot of planning, had certain objectives, had primary objectives, secondary objectives, long-term, short-term, had lots of stuff, had existing business relationship with them. But an emergency situation happened, right? They had to respond to it, and then it changed the dynamic. You see, it has to be fluid. So then I have to be patient and wait, and I'll have another call with them later on, get them the information they need. So let's, within all this, as we talk about this next step, setting appointments, right? Getting the customer to talk to us. That's important. We have prospects. We want to get in front of them, right? We want to make sure that they give us time. So there is certain levels of focus that we need to have to make an appointment, to identify that it is the right person we're talking to, right? Again, we're sifting through this data, this funnel of leads, this funnel of prospects. You got to get in front of them at some point, right? I mean, yeah, you could have a product, you could have a website, people could just come and buy your service. But most of the selling process is a collaborative effort. It's a dynamic effort where you have to get in front of them. You have to talk to them. You have to communicate. You have to sell them on an idea or a service and go through the process. So there's a couple points to focus on. I want you to kind of start to think through as we make an appointment, as we get to sit down with the right person, as we send our resume in and we get that interview. Okay, think about that. Focus or receptivity. That is a particular point. We start to think about the person who will listen and be receptive to us, right? And we need to give them, that seller, valuable information. So we'll call that like focus or receptivity. are they going to be willing to listen to what I have to say? If I did my job well in terms of narrowing down these leads to prospects, if I did my information gathering well, if I planned my objectives well, I'll have figured out who to talk to so that they'll be receptive to listen to me. I'll have sent my resume to the right companies, and I'll get the call that the person will be like willing to talk to me based on my qualifications. Receptive. So that's that first word. Okay, focus of dissatisfaction. You got to think through this too. The person who is most likely to perceive problems. Okay, when you're dealing with somebody, again, sometimes based on that personality profile, they might be more problem focused. They might see why other products are not working. They might be the ones that are looking for another vendor that you provide because they're not happy. So you need to start thinking through, okay, if they're not happy with this person, how can I make sure I'm not perceived as a problem? Right? And so how can I address my focus, which is this next one of power, to alleviate a potential problem before it arises? And then this focus of power, think about who are you talking to? You're talking to a client, can they approve? Can they prevent, right? Remember that adversary person that we talk about, right? Or can they influence the action? So as you start to make appointments and get to sit down with people and communicate, start to think about like the receptivity. Are they going to be willing to listen to me? Do they give me the right amount of time? Are they going to be nitpicking? Are they going to be looking to be dissatisfied? Are they not even the potential, like the focus here? Maybe they're the influencer and their job is to ruffle feathers. Their job is to, oh, there's 10 salespeople trying to sell products. I want to get rid of 8 of them. So my role as the buyer is to show lots of potential problems, right? I'm the gatekeeper. I want to make sure that those that are coming to me have really good products, right? You know, you send a resume in for a new job and they're not going to look at all 100 applicants. They'll whittle things down. They don't have the right qualifications or whatever. So that's the focus of dissatisfaction there. And then again, you start to think about this focus of power. Can they buy what you're selling? Do they have the money? Can they prevent you from making the sale? Are they influential? Again, start to think through that as you make an appointment. And then sometimes we kind of start to think through, who are these individuals? You know, some are better at generating, we'll call it consensus, right? Agreements. If you're good at getting objectives and good at sales and making connections, you want to start to think about, you know, improving your ability to get consensus in this buying, right? It's not always only making the sale in that first time, but can you, whoever you talk to within the company, can you get a general consensus that they like your product, that they're going to continue with you? That's important. So as you start to think about, this is like now the kind of the personalities of some of these people you're dealing with. All right. You could kind of think about the personality of a go-getter, right? They're always looking for new ideas. Look at how this relates to that matrix we talked about of dealing with the driver, the analytical, the expressive, those people. Okay, start to think about who those people might be in those areas. Okay, the go-getter. teachers. If you're kind of in the make an appointment with a teacher or in that area, those people love to share insights, right? If you're a teacher, do you love to share insights and ideas with others? Is that their personality style? Are they more of a teacher? Are they more of a go-getter? Or are they more of a skeptic, right? As I said, there's those people that are the more adversary, the more that finding problems with things. They might be more analytical, and then they're skeptical. Well, I don't believe your product does what it says it's going to do. Your service for your software, yeah, it sounds great, but you know what? We've had a lot of problems with a lot of service providers in our software. How do I know yours is going to work well? So you have to speak to the skeptics sometimes as well as you're making an appointment. We talk about time, right? That, again, this varies, right? If you're making an appointment, you might have to make an appointment 6 months out. Maybe a customer can see you next week. Maybe they're so busy, it's got to be a month from now, right? Again, I keep using this analogy because I think everybody's looking for a new job at some point. I guess we're in this MBA program and thinking about, doing better at what we're doing and, increasing our value. Is it the right time? You're interviewing, the timing might be important. So you start to think through that. Right place, that's more of the setting, the environment. So if you're making an appointment, do you make the appointment at their place of business? Is it done online? Is it on a webcast? Is it a Zoom call? Is it just pick up the phone and talk to them? Is it virtual? Is it in person? When we think about that, you also start to think about, okay, they're happy to set up a Zoom call with me, but would it be more effective if I drove out to their place of business and was able to meet them one-on-one? Can I meet them over lunch, right? It's not only at the place of business. Where might you meet them, right? A lot of sales are on a golf course. A lot of sales are made, at a lunch or a dinner. So what's the environment is for the appointment? Am I going to talk to them at a trade show? Maybe in between in the trade show, there's lots of product demonstrations and information sharing. Maybe I'm going to meet with them at the trade show. Maybe that's the best place. Maybe I'm going to have them come to a luncheon that I sponsor with all satisfied customers. Maybe that's the right place. So you see, the environment where we set up an appointment to have our meeting makes a huge difference, right? Huge difference. And then as we start to cultivate relationships, we want to, start to think through things and barriers and screens. And, when we talk about gatekeepers and people that are preventing us from setting up that appointment, how do we build relationships? So, for instance, a personal example was when I was in the book selling business of textbooks, walking in, yes, I'm dealing with professors, but a lot of times I go to the department and the department has a secretary, and that person, he or she, is also the gatekeeper. They're a barrier. I can't go in and talk to the professors if I can't get by the departmental office person. They're a subordinate. They're somebody lower on the totem pole. I don't actually sell to them, but it's important because it makes it difficult for me to meet with the potential client if they prevent it. So they're like a screen. And so I have to obviously be kind to the secretary. I have to be kind to the office people, whether I bring them flowers, whether I bring them candy, whether I just engage with them and talk to them, whether I bring them bagels for the department and say, what, do you want some, why don't you have some bagels too? You have to get to know them. right? So you need to think about this even when you're setting up an appointment from a standpoint of who are the people who might prevent me from getting that appointment? How do I need to address and work with them? I might have to, again, convince the gatekeeper that this meeting is possible, that this is important, right? They may be there. A lot of times it is, especially in sales. There are people that are there to prevent you from getting in the door, getting the appointment. They'll screen the calls. They'll screen it. So sometimes it's like, how do I get that appointment? How do I get past that gatekeeper? Sometimes it's like, they said name drops with the higher ups, right? So sometimes if I ever have relationships with certain of the professors, I could maybe get some of those people to come out to the office and say, "Oh, Todd, hi, Professor Todd, I see that you're here. Oh, great." And so it kind of puts the secretary at ease. Oh, you have a relationship with this Professor Johnson. Oh, they must, you must already be doing good work. All right, so now you could talk to this other Professor Smith, right? So it becomes this dynamic relationship. And how do I keep cultivating relationships with all the people who could help me get the appointment, all the people who could help me get that interview, all the people that could help me get in front of that person I need to talk to? You can kind of see when we're doing all this pre-planning and this information gathering, there's a lot of dynamic here. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of ways that can get mucked up to prevent us from being successful. And so that's why it's really a profession, the profession of sales, profession of communicating, really is. So some suggestions, we'll talk through these and then we can wrap it up here. When we're making appointments, when we're trying to gather, get in front of that prospect, some interesting things to think about. As we talked about, can we anticipate objections ahead of time and already have ways we're going to respond? Again, I like the analogy of a chess match. Okay. Obviously, an opponent, I'm playing a game in a sense, right? Sales call. I have ways my opening move, I'm going to respond. Can I think through ahead of time how they might respond and what they might do to object, to cause me to not play my game? Can I think through that ahead of time? That's important. Anticipating objections. And it's sometimes you need to think about, do we need to go through the complete sales presentation beforehand just to get the appointment? No, but maybe there's certain points that we need to have in mind, right, to get the appointment, right? What are the three key features I'm going to talk about my product when I'm in the presentation, when I'm with the buyer, with the prospect, and have those in mind ahead of time, right? This is kind of, it was kind of humorous when I read this in the book, but it was in there, and I'll give you some more kinds of things. When I say real life, I want it to be real life objective I've heard from people, right? But these are responses to objections. It's like, okay, objection, I'm sorry, but the manager's busy now, right? It's like, come on, right? That happens. That does happen. How could you respond as a salesperson? You got to be nimble. Got to think, okay, you could say, should I call back in a half hour? You give them an alternative, or would you suggest a different time I call? Okay, I could, and they might say, well, just send us the information. Just send an email and I'll get it to the proper person. Well, that's probably not going to work very well. So you got to have a response ahead of time that can meet that objective, that would get you to keep moving on the path of getting closer to getting your objectives met, right? Maybe a secondary objective, you can get that appointment, but you can't make a sale unless you get the appointment, right? You get in front of that client. So they might say, you know what? We already have 3 of those products that that your company has. We don't need another one. You could talk about, you know what? Yeah, there's that, but we have all these other ones here, and I know you have some needs beyond what you're saying. You know, let's talk about those things, right? There's other objections that people say. Again, mailing the information. That's I love that. Can you send me a document? Right? You have to think through. It's like, okay, if sales is a numbers game sometimes, yes, sometimes you play the game. Other people I know, you're not going to send a proposal to somebody that you haven't done a Q&A session with. You're just not going to do that, right? So you don't send the information, but you figure out a way to meet a different objective. So, they might say that, we had a product like that and it didn't work. We didn't like it. Oh, that happens all the time. You know what? We had software that we used to track our inventory was terrible. And we just didn't like it. So we found something that's pretty good. We're going to stay with that. And you might be like, oh, well, how do I deal with that? Here's the way to deal with it. You got to probe, right? You got to ask questions to find out, because they're still not fully happy. You got to figure out what is their pain point, what is their reason that maybe they'll be open to looking. So it becomes this dynamic process, whether we're trying to get an appointment where we're obviously eventually we need to get in the door to make a sale, but what potentially could somebody say that, no, you can't talk to that person? Some of it is legitimate. Others is just a way of them putting you off. And having the response ahead of time is really what we're talking about here. So just kind of start to think through this, like overall pieces. We'll wrap this up as I talk about this. Good salespeople should plan to do a couple of things. All right. Make a good impression, right? And build credibility. A good communicator should seek to make a good impression and build credibility, right? A good salesperson should uncover customer needs, questions. A good salesperson should answer anticipated questions and concerns. I should have put this one in red because I think it's one of the most important things. Again, how good are you at pre-planning? Can you ahead of time think of potential roadblocks that buyer might give you, concerns they might have? If you've thought through things, you could already have anticipated some of their questions and concerns and have ways to deal with that. And then you become more efficient. And so then it becomes this last piece in the chapter about seeding, sending customers important and useful information. It becomes this, if I can't close them on the first sale, can I at least get the customer useful information to continue the selling process? Can I continue the selling process? That's the key, right? Because it is a process. It is adaptive selling. Can't make the sale now. Can I make it next week, next month? Can I continue the process? So that's all I have for you in this class. Next week, we're going to talk about, which is really good, once we get in the sales call, that dynamic. How do we interact in that communication? We've talked a lot about the listening and the questions, but now we're in the actual sales call. What's going on here? How do I do what I do? How do I make the sale, right? How do I handle those objections? That's really some of the meat in sales. We'll talk about that. All right. So give you a heads up. We're going back to the Tuesday schedule next time. So we will be meeting a week from Tuesday. And then the next Tuesday. So we've had 2 Saturdays in a row. We'll have 2 Tuesdays. That's all in Microsoft Teams. I put it in the calendar. It's there. I will send a note in just to make sure. No, we're not meeting this Tuesday. We're skipping this Tuesday. We're going, I guess, 9 days until our next class. And because of that, you will have 2 chapters to focus on. There'll be another quiz because you'll have a little additional time. And I remember, again, the assignments that we have for those of you that still have not sent them in. Please complete those. I'm enjoying reviewing them. They are really rich. And I appreciate those that have already sent them in. I will do my best to get them graded in a timely manner. So there's the class for you today about the pre-call planning, the objectives, getting that appointment. And again, start to think through as we put each of these different chapters together, these different weeks together, how this becomes a dynamic process and how we become very effective at becoming good salespeople overall. All right. So that's it for this week. It was great to be with you. Thank you for being here again. Meeting a week from Tuesday, back to the Tuesday cycle for 2 weeks. And then after that, we'll go back to Saturdays. Okay. But next 2 Tuesdays, we will meet and we will see everyone here 9 days from now. Okay. Remember those assignments, please get them in. Any questions, just send me a chat. I will see everyone here back very shortly. Okay.
So Professor, this is our schedule
Yes.
for the rest of this term.
On Microsoft Teams, I posted. So yes, for the next 2 weeks, we will be meeting on Tuesdays. Not this coming Tuesday, the next, 2 Tuesdays in a row. Then we're going back to Saturdays. So what we've been doing is 2 Tuesdays, 2 Saturdays, back to 2 Tuesdays.
Until we finish this term.
Until we finish the term, exactly.
Okay.
We might end on a note where all the last 3 are on a Saturday, especially with the final exam. I want to make sure everybody is available. But when we get to that, we're still in mid-February, so we have some time. But again, the next 2 Tuesdays we're meeting, not this Tuesday, the following one, and the following one after that, then back to Saturday. So I will make sure things are in the WhatsApp group too. In addition to the calendar, it's already in the Teams calendar for you. You can kind of scroll through and see, oh yeah, the selling class is here. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome. Welcome, Julien. Okay. Everyone, it's good to be with you. Have a great rest of the day, evening, however much time you have left. And I will see you back here a week from Tuesday. Okay? Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, Professor. Bye, everyone.